center of every discussion. Learn how it affects your development. Labby Till with Dr. Martha J. every Sunday at 5:30 p.m.
It is now 29 minutes after 5 o'clock. DBS Radio is standing by to bring you the next scheduled program hosted by Dr. Martha Joseph of Labitil, La Habitil, Habit That Counts.
Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Labitil, Habits That Count, a place Good afternoon, fellow listeners. Welcome to another episode of Labitil, Habit That Count, a place where we examine issues, and concerns, and we hopefully will utilize habits that we can implement to fix them. I am your host, Dr. Martha Joseph Watt. And for the month of June, we have a few family members who have been sponsoring us, and they are Leonard Taxi Service from St. Thomas. We have Hilltop Renovations. We have Rainbow Constructions, and of course, Budding Writers Academy. We are coming to you live on radio, DBS Radio, streaming live on the internet, as well as on YouTube. All right, so today we're talking about Labitil, and I chose to talk about Mauvais Labitil. And I don't know why I'm having a feedback, but I'm hearing myself again. That's why I'm having that little issue. But anyway, I hope we get it sorted out. And that we can continue. This is rather upsetting. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start off by I want to hail out the community of Dailies, because Dailies, of course, is where I came from. And then I want to I don't know why I'm hearing myself twice. Okay, I'm going to have to change this. Okay. I'm having a feedback. I don't know if anybody can help me, but I'm hearing myself over and over. Okay. So apparently it looks like we've got it sorted out. So today, again, I'm going to start off. Today we start off with, we're looking at Mauvais Labitil. And I want to hail out my community of Dailies, because that's where I grew up. I want to start off, although today we're going to look at the habit loop and why we do what we do. I want to start off by talking a little bit about one of my Mauvais Labitil that seems very, very silly, but it's just one of the ways to start off. So as a child growing up in Dailies, I did not, Patois was forbidden. Patois was forbidden, so we were not allowed to speak Patois. And so I was a teacher's pet, and I didn't want to speak any Patois at all. But then I knew drizzles of Patois, like a word here and a word there. And so my grandmother would always say, call me to go make messages. So when she would say, Marcella, Vinioti Dadona. When she said those words, I already know what she meant. So I would come up to her, listen to everything she said, and guess what? You probably guessed it. I didn't understand anything she said anyway, except for the word Dadona. And so I would go over to my neighbor, but my neighbor, which is Dadona, had a granddaughter. And I would say to her, Dadona, grandma, mama says something, but I don't know what. And then I would have to send her granddaughter to Tufi home to my mama, my grandma, to find out what the message was. And then she would have to go back to her grandmother to find out if, what it was going to be. And every time I did that same thing, my grandmother would say, Mauvais l'habitude. And then one day, of course, I got something for that Mauvais l'habitude, because when she came to strike me, I lifted my hand and cut it with my little finger. And the next day, we ended up by the village chiropractor, Mr. Skinner. So my question to us, est-ce que coup ka corrigé? Does blows do anything to us when we have a bad habit? So, of course, I know some of you are saying, yes, blows must have fixed you, because I did share it on Facebook this week. And a few people say, oh, yes, blows, they did it a couple of times, but eventually they probably got it. But what psychologists or neuropsychologists are telling us is that blows doesn't do it at all. I am not an expert on habits. I'm not a neurologist, but habits have done wonders for me. I believe I got over migraine by using principles of habits, even when I didn't know what it was. I developed a process to teach students to write in schools, and it's very successful. And it's based on the principles of habits. So I know habits work very well. So before we dive into anything else, I want to invite you all to call. If you're locally, you can dial 448-3284 if you're calling directly in Dominica, or you could do 1-800-327 for your local numbers. And if you are calling internationally, it's 305-432-9744, and you're invited to call anytime. Normally, we wait until the end of the show, but you can call anytime. So what I want to do is to talk a little bit about what is, how habits work, how the way habits work, and why we develop habits. So the brain has a way of saving efforts. The way we develop habits is because the brain decides, I don't want to remember everything, or I don't want to have to put all that effort into everything we do. So once we do it over and over, the brain stores it so that you no longer have to concentrate for it. For example, once we learn to walk, we never have to look down again when we're walking. Our brain automatically, we know that we're putting our foot somewhere and we don't have to look. So our brain doesn't have to put any extra work into walking. Brushing your teeth. Once you learn to brush your teeth, you do not have to put in any extra work into putting into, you can do all of those things without even looking, with your eyes closed, actually. And for those of you who drive stick shift, when you learn to drive, you begin to think of, you begin to feel for when you have to lift your foot, when you have to do this and that and the other. But once you've gotten it, you do not have to think about it before. Haven't you ever thought of, sometimes you say, I have to stop somewhere on my way home, and then you just pass the place straight? That's because your brain, you're not thinking about what you're doing. Your brain is not doing anything difficult about that. You've made it a habit, and so your brain doesn't have to work on that anymore, okay? However, we can get to develop habits that are not necessarily desirable. And so we always have to pay attention to, so we know why the brain develops habits. Now we need to learn how it develops habits. So first thing, we need to know that there is a cue. A cue is something that triggers the behavior that follows. And the habit is made up of a loop. And when you think of a loop goes around, okay? So there's the cue, and there's something that follows it, and something that follows it, and something that follows it. So a cue can be a place, it can be a time of day, It can be an emotion or a thing that you feel. It can be a person that you see. Or it could be a thing that you see. It could be something that you smell. So the cue is that thing that precedes or triggers the behavior that follows it. All right? And the behavior that follows it is called a routine. The routine immediately follows.
Excuse me, permit if you will. Someone is on the line.
We say that we engage in that routine because we are craving a specific reward. So what is that thing, that reward that you are craving? The reward now is that that it follows the routine. And usually you do it because, you know, there's something that you really want. There's something that you're craving. So for example, you feel sticky. Your body starts to feel sticky. You probably took your armpit and you're feeling a little stenchy and you're like, you know what? I'm going to take a shower. So the cue was what you are feeling. It could be the middle of the day or it could be the end of the day and you are home. So you're at home. That's the time. That's the location. And so you decide, I'm going to take a shower. That's the behavior that immediately follows that cue. However, there is a reason for taking that shower. There's something that you're craving. What are you craving? You're craving the feeling of feeling clean. And that's why you will actually go ahead and take that shower. So the habit loop is in that particular area. Remember, you can call and share your Mauvais Labitil when you grow and then why it is that the blows was not able to do it. Why blows were not able to change or remove that routine, that behavior that you were exhibiting. So I'm going to share one of the Labitils I had when I was growing up, and my grandma actually did something that worked. So I don't know how many of you used to peel pigeon peas. There was just a time when pigeon peas came by and, oh, I hated it for some reasons. The reason was, if the pigeon pea had a hole in the pod, I knew there was going to be a shinny, a worm. And I was afraid of worms. And so what I would do, I would take that pea with the hole and I would throw it in the pile with the skin. So one day my grandmother figured it out. She realized, but si mateni go pan poisala, comment faire si ane sapwa nou tape? If we had all of those, so she's figured out stuff. If we had such and such amount of peas, why is it that the output does not match what we had? And so she figured it out. She realized that in the trash had more peas than in the bowl. And so she, of course, warned me about my Mauvais Labitil. And then she, give me a couple carrots or so, but that didn't work. Every time we had peas to peel, same thing, I would throw it because I am afraid of worms. But one day she figured it out and she said, okay, she placed another basket or hat sometimes. And she said, anyone I do not want to peel, place it in that particular spot. So from that time, she gave me, what happened was, so the cue for me was the hole in the pea, in the pod. Once I saw the hole in the pod, the behavior that would immediately follow would be to dump it in the garbage, in the pea, in the area that, in the la popoa. But what she would do, she would give me another place to put it. So I was comfortable in taking it and placing it in the place where she would revisit it. So because of that, instead of throwing that pea, because I was afraid of the worms, I was able to still get rid of it and not have to deal with the worms in the end. So of course I got the reward of, which was I was craving, is no fair. I didn't want to be afraid when I was peeling peas. I didn't want to hate peeling peas again. So therefore she figured it out. So today it's about, how do we support our children? How do we support our communities? How do we support our spouses even? How do we support our classrooms? How do we support our communities? By utilizing the habit loop. Once we understand that, hey, every time she sees this, then this is the behavior that follows, and this is what the person is craving. Let's take, for example, something that we did last week. We looked at the children with, a week before, we looked at the children and the electronic devices. Every time, when does the child throw the tantrum? Is it every time they see an electronic device? Or is it every time the electronic device, the power dies off, or you take it away? What happens? When do they get that tantrum? And so once you realize, okay, every time I take that iPad from that child, or that device, he or she is throwing a tantrum. So you've recognized that. But what you need to know now is, what is that child craving? Is the child craving the device, or are they craving the dopamine rush that they would get when they play a game? So in other words, in order for us to fix a problem, we must understand what the child is craving. I might give you a reward that doesn't satisfy the crave. So therefore, I need to know that when I take the iPad from the child, or when the battery dies, it's not that the child wants the actual device. The child wants what they were getting while they were on a game in that device. So yes, we need to understand. And by the way, there are thousands of ways to approach changing bad habits. It's just that Charles Duhigg studied this, and he used the research that students conducted with MIT, University of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And this is the one that I have spent a lot of time plowing through, but there are lots of other people. There is James Clear with Atomic Habits, and we'll talk about that in a while. Atomic Habits, you can use them, they're just small. So instead of looking for that big picture, what are we doing to make sure that we can get a little piece at a time? So just to recap on what we said, what we want to do is to make sure that we can understand what is that thing that triggers the behavior. What is that thing that makes you behave in that particular way? So if the problem is alcoholism for adults, what makes you want to drink? Is it every time you see the shop, every time you see the advertisement, or every time you get depressed? You would have to find out what it is that triggers that. And then you would have to find out, what do I normally do every time that thing happens? Well, I go find a bottle and I drink. Or but then what you have to do now, what is that feeling that I'm getting when I'm finished? I just want to just forget my worries, or I just want to just have that stimulus. And so if you know what it is you're craving, then you're able to find something and replacing it. So the point is, if you cannot find something that is satisfying, something that's going to take care of that craving, it might be a problem to replace that. So how do we corriger mauvais l'habitude? How do we fix bad habits? We want to make sure we can identify the routine or the behavior we want to change. Although there is a cue, we want to know, what is that behavior that we want to change? And then the next thing we want to do is to find out, when was that behavior exhibited? What place were we? Is it because they saw somebody? Is it because they saw something? What happened? What caused them to do that? So we want to make sure we can do that as well. The other thing we can do is to make sure that we can find something that will replace that behavior. So in the case of my granny, she gave me a place to put the peas with the holes in it. In the case of the child with the iPad, you want to know what was the child craving. If it's dopamine, then come on, before that child gets to that space, let's find something that we can do. Let's go outside to play. Don't put it away and tell them, sit and be quiet. It's not going to work. You can think of almost any other habit in your life. And we have to be careful about what habits we create in people. I can think of so many for adults. where I might want a specific behavior from my spouse, and I might have a specific action that I do or a specific thing that I wear. And next thing you know, I get the reaction that I want. But what we need to understand is the brain does not necessarily understand. Well, you only react that way when it was that person doing it to your spouse, because you might get your spouse into that um mode or develop that habit, and then they go away and see somebody else displaying the same thing, and they might do what they're not supposed to do. So we have to be careful, because the brain, what they tell us, the brain does not differentiate between bad and good habits. It just knows that it's a habit that you engaged in, and it's going to do it no matter what. So what we have to do is to make sure that we can identify the routine. Once we identify the routine, now we can decide when does that person display that routine? What is the cue that the person had? Was it a place? Was it a thing? Was it a person? Was it a smell? Was it a location? Was it a time? What it is that displayed that? And then we're going to start saying what craving, what do we want to satisfy after that behavior? So, and then once you've identified a behavior, you want to make sure that you can have a plan. All right. Mel Robbins, I like her. I've been listening to her for a while, and she talks about the 5-second rule. And for me, the time between the cue and the routine, that's exactly where I think that 5-second rule can work very well. So if you know that that cue just showed up and that person is going to behave in that particular way, and even for us, let us suppose you have a habit of every time you feel for something sweet, you went to run for an ice cream. So what do you do between that time that you got that cue, that feeling for that sweetness, and reaching for that ice cream? Mel talks about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What she said that does is because your brain, you're counting in reverse, you're giving your brain time to think in a reverse order. But then you must have a plan. So if I count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and I have no plan on what to reach for, I might still end up reaching for an ice cream. So make sure that you have a plan to replace that routine, and make sure that routine is replaced by something that's going to satisfy the craving. So I felt for something sweet. I'm not going to reach for ice cream because for the past 4 months I've been doing it and I gained X amount of pounds. So I have to find something that's going to give me the same satisfaction. Why did I want the ice cream in the first case? Is it because I just wanted something sweet? Is it because my sugar level was low? Is it because that I just wanted to snack? So I need to find something that will take care of that same feeling. So if you want to call and share your Mauvais Labitil, whether it's for you, your child, or your childhood growing up, and how did your parents deal with it? And how can you deal with it as an adult right now? So now that you know better, of course, we say, when you know better, you do better. So I do not know if we have any calls. I'm going to ask if there's any call, we will take it. By the way, we wanted to give away top up to 2 callers today. Any 2 callers locally, we will definitely go ahead and give you 2 top-ups. The local number to call DBS Radio is 448-3284 or 1-800-327. So you want to make sure that you call and share, or you can share on Facebook or on YouTube.
Excuse me, permit if you...
So again, I'm going to say there are thousands of formulas to change habits. However, if we understand how they are formed, if we study the parts, we'll be able to better those we care about. And that would include our children, it would include our spouse, our workspaces, our class.
Excuse me, someone is on the line.
And ourselves. We can look at several. And the reason why I say that there is no fixed way of dealing with hello? I can't hear anybody, Did we have somebody calling?
Yes, someone is on the line.
Okay, thank you.
Go right ahead, caller.
Hello?
We lost the caller. We lost the caller.
Oh, we lost the caller. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can try back again, caller. We still have some time. So call back and share with us how do you still believe kuka corrige? I mean, it's a saying I grew up with, kupaka corrige. And then one of the things that I want to share with you is that neurologists believe that we don't break the habit. Because we replaced it with a new one, we have the new one in place. And that gives us it explains why some people go back. People spend money, lots of months and months and years in rehab, and then they stay clean for like a couple of years, few years, and then they go back. They say they relapse. Why did they relapse? The cue presented itself again, and the replacement was not quick enough. That replacement has to be right there within that 5-second window so that the person doesn't go back into that space. And so you can think of your personal struggles. My cousin said to me the other day that his wife said that every time she buys a large container of nuts, he eats on it until it's finished. I had that same problem. I would buy the big container of nuts, and then by the end of the week, it was gone. And how would I deal with that? It was a habit that I realized I wasn't even sure what I was craving. I didn't know. So what I decided to do is, okay, every time I see those nuts, I wanted to crunch. I don't know what I was satisfying, and I decided to deal with it a different way. So I started buying nuts in packets, small amounts. And the first time I bought it that way, I ate 3 packets because I still wanted nuts. But then even if I would hide it in the past, it wouldn't work. But the point is, I had to give myself that 5-second rule. Once I felt for those nuts, I would count those 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and say, nope, you're not going to have nuts. You're going to take something else. So let's take some strawberries instead. Let's take some grapes instead. Let's take something else that can give you. But what is that thing you were craving for? Was I craving for the crunch, or was I craving for just a snack? If it's just a snack, I suppose anything can do. If it's a crunch, then find something else that crunches. But the point is, we have to understand, we will always have to understand the habit loop in order for us to be successful at replacing them. And when you replace them, have a plan and make sure you're persistent. If you're persistent, it will work. And if it's for your child, make sure that you're persistent with it as well. Do not just take it away and say you have to deal without it. No, you must replace it with something, because there is a craving that routine wants. There's something it's craving for. So make sure that you're replacing it with a routine that can bring about the same craving, the same reward that the person craved for. Okay, so you've been listening to Labby Teal, Habits That Count. I want to encourage you to look for the extended version on podcast. You will be able to listen to it on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much for your listen. I know we are a minute away. We had a rough start, and hopefully I can get that sorted out next time. But thank you again to all those of you, my family members. You've been so supportive. My brothers, my sisters, my son, all of you who have been supporting me. DBS Radio, I cannot say thank you enough. And I want you to look forward to next week, because we're talking about procrastination. What is that thing that you've been putting off, and what you can do to make sure that you can deal with procrastination. Don't call yourself a procrastinator, but we all engage in them at some point or another. So again, think of the cue, how you replace those habits, find the cue, make sure you can find the routine, change that routine, replace that routine with something that's going to make sure that you get the same reward, the same reward at the end. I'm your host, Martha, and Dr. Martha J, and I want to tell you thank you again for your listen.
You are tuned in to Labitel, Habits That Count, with Dr. Martha J.
Join DBS Radio next Sunday for another program, La Habitil, Habit That Counts. Join Dr. Martha Joseph next Sunday for another interesting program.
Habits That Count is hosted by Dr. Martha Marcella Joseph at 5:30 p.m. every Sunday. Dr. Martha J, educator, instructor, literacy specialist, coach, storyteller, and author. Dr. Martha J will explore the use of principles of habit to positively impact success in our lives and our community. The 30-minute program will be aired both on radio and social media. Labitel, Habits That Count, will also explore habits we can utilize to remedy or change our circumstances. The habit loop will be at the center of every discussion. Every Sunday, Labitel, Habits That Count, 5:30 p.m. on radio, Facebook, and YouTube. Labitel, Habits That Count.